Or is it hospitality that God wants from us? This passage has been reminding me of a day that I was in my home church when I was growing up. I was maybe 8 or so. And this woman came in to the sanctuary naked, completely naked, in the middle of the worship service. What should we do? You know what the pastor did? He took the fabric that was hanging from the cross and covered her. He completely stopped the worship service to take care of this woman. And he took the fabric from the cross. And we thought that was so sacred. You wouldn't touch the cross. And he covered her with that piece of fabric. I don't remember much of that day, but that act from my pastor was enough to make an impact in me. Now, in this reading that we just read, the people of Israel were out of exile. After generations of being under the oppression of the Babylonian Empire, after generations of being out of their own homeland, they were back home. The promises that they had been hearing for years and centuries even were finally coming true. They are back home. They have their own land again. They are free from bondage. They are liberated. By the power of God, they were back home. All great news. Everything should be just fine, right? Wonderful. But it wasn't. You see, this was a great gift from God to them, to be back home. But it came with a responsibility. The city didn't look like this renewed, new heavens and earth that they were expecting. They had to do the work to rebuild the city. They had to reconstruct their society, their temple, their whole religious system. And it should not surprise us, but different people had different opinions about how to go about that. You probably have experienced this at school or at work when you have to work in a group project and everybody has a different opinion on how to go about it. Maybe even in the selection of the topic, everybody wants to do a different topic, and you have arguments about if the cardboard needs to be cut in squares or triangles, or who's going to prepare the PowerPoint presentation, or who's going to be out speaking in front of the group on behalf of the small group, or should we divide the presentation in different slides for different people? How are you going about it? How are you going to go about it? Everybody has a different opinion. Well, that was going on with the people of Israel when they were trying to reconstruct their religious life. Different people had different ideas on how to go about worship. They had different ideas about who should be the priests now, and what should be the main rituals that we would follow. For them, the major question was, who is part of the people of God? While they had different opinions regarding the right way of worshiping, at the beginning of this poem, in Isaiah 58, we read that they delighted in worship. We read that they delighted knowing God's way and drawing near to God. They were doing the right thing in the right ways. They were even fasting and putting ashes on and humbling themselves with sackcloth. And this was the right way of fasting. But they felt that God was not responding to their efforts. They had this complaint against God. Why do we fast but you do not see? Why do we humble ourselves but you do not notice? Well, what they were going through is nothing like we are living here in TAFPC. Nothing at all. But for sure, I think we have been trying new things for worship, and especially when we worship everybody together in the joint services. And maybe different people have different opinions about how to go about that. And different people have different preferences about music, about the structure of the liturgy, about the length of the service, about what languages to use or not to use. But we too delight in worship, despite of our difference of opinion. And we too may have one complaint or another to God regarding what's going on in TAFPC. We may be asking God some questions like they were doing because things are not going according to our expectations. Isaiah 58 provides a surprising response to the people. from God. You see, God kinds of changed the subject. He turns their attention away from worship practices into something else, namely justice and righteousness. For God, hospitality, among other aspects of justice, is true worship. You see, God has liberated them as an act of grace. They did not work for them to be able to be free from the Babylonian Empire. God just did that for them. But afterward, it seems that God was expecting something from them. For God, worship as rituals and ceremonies is incomplete if we do not do it accompanied by justice and righteousness in the city. And this includes several aspects that they are unfolded in Isaiah 56 through 59. One of those aspects is hospitality, as described in verse 7. Is it not to share your bread with the hungry and bring the homeless poor into your house? When you see the naked, to cover them and not to hide yourself from your own king? Three aspects of human life are addressed in this verse, and they go to the basic needs of human beings: food, clothing, and shelter. As the people of Israel were figuring out how to live together again and how to rebuild their society and religion, God wanted them to make sure that the basic needs of all members of the community were being satisfied. No one in the community should go hungry. No one in the community should be naked or homeless. The people of God were called to stop focusing on themselves and start focusing on the needs of others and start caring for each other. After the people's complaint, the rest of the poem in Isaiah 58 follows a structure of a series of requirements and consequences, a series of implicit ifs and thens. If you do this, then this. This particular if is followed by the consequences of light, healing, and God's protection. In the tradition of Isaiah, light referred to the well-being of the whole community. It referred to the shalom of the city, which is a complete harmony marked by internal prosperity and freedom from imperial intervention. We may think that God is setting some conditions to give them these gifts, that God is kind of bargaining with them. If you do this, I will give you that. But another way to look about it is to think that God is just telling it like it is. We know that every act we do has a consequence. And God was telling them the consequences of engaging in hospitality. When we practice hospitality, the consequence is the well-being of the community. We cannot have shalom in the city if we do not love our neighbors as we love God. And we cannot have shalom in the city if we do not contribute our part to make sure that everyone has something to eat, something to clothe with, and shelter to protect themselves from the weather. This mandate is so important that Jesus touched on these very same things when he was talking about the judgment of the nations in Matthew 25. And we saw it when we were talking in the children's sermon, but just as a reminder, it goes like this. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep at his right hand and the goats at the left. Then the king will say to those at his right hand, "Come, you that are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me." Then the righteous will answer, "Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly, I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me. You see, the king did not ask them if they used ashes or sackcloth when they fasted. He did not went to the right ways of doing the worship ceremonies and rituals. Rather, he gave the kingdom as inheritance to those who practice the radical hospitality that makes us all family. The hospitality that brings well-being to the community because the basic needs of everyone are covered. Here in TAFPC, we may continue to have differences of opinion regarding worship practices. It seems to be part of the history of Judaism and Christianity several centuries before Christ, up until now. But we can certainly be united in practicing hospitality. Together, we can feed the hungry. Together, we can cover the naked. And together, we can shelter the homeless. I know for a fact that we can do this well because we are very good in fellowship. And that's the one thing that all the groups in TAFPC, all of them, agree on, is that TAFPC is very good in fellowship. If you ask anybody around what's the strongest suit of TAFPC, of Sky Fellowship, of Taiwanese Ministry, of TKC, all of them say fellowship. And you know what's the difference between fellowship and hospitality? That in fellowship, you're doing good things for somebody you know. And in hospitality, you're doing the same things for somebody you don't. And that's the beauty of hospitality, that you are being an agent of God's grace because you are transforming somebody from being a stranger into being a friend or family. We are called to be hospitable in gratitude for God's salvation. Because God liberated us to be in community, we should extend hospitality. We have continuous opportunities in this church to respond to Isaiah 58:7. Coming soon, we have several mission opportunities. We can volunteer for the Elijah Soup Kitchen, for example, or Project Hospitality, or Habitat for Humanity, and the homeless shelter that happens pretty much all year long. And even when we don't have the minimum age required for some of these projects, we can still join those efforts. Like, for example, supporting the fundraising efforts, like the 11 teeners did last weekend with their baking sale. And for sure, most importantly, we can all join in prayer for these mission opportunities. So it will be a blessing for all the participants involved. Furthermore, every day, wherever we go, we have opportunities to share our food and our resources for the well-being of the communities to which we belong. For example, if you keep snacks in your work area, are they hidden so you can take them when you need them? Or are they publicly displayed so your coworkers can also partake of them? You see, little things like that will attract people to you and transform them from strangers to family. Finally, I would like to share some ideas as to how we can show more hospitality as a church. Just last week, a woman named Mary Davila published an article entitled "A View from the Pew." She is an Episcopal priest, but she was looking for a home church for her and her family, her husband and her daughter, a baby daughter. And her whole family visited about 10 churches in a period of 3 months. And based on those experiences, she gave us the following suggestions for churches to be more welcoming for newcomers. Her first suggestion was to have signs everywhere. When you are new to a building and do not know people there, signs can help you navigate the building and get to the right place. Take TAFPC, for example. It is hard to know from the outside which door is the right door to just enter into the building. If you came in a car and took the back door, the first thing you see is a staircase. And from there, you don't know where to go, unless you come in with somebody you know. And it happened to be the first time I came. And just last Sunday, we had a visitor, Matt. I don't know if you remember him, so I asked him. So, because he had the same feeling I did. Oh, this church is so welcoming. The warmth, it's awesome. Yeah, you feel very welcome. That's good. So I asked him, how easy was it to you to find us here? And he said, well, I kind of had to guess which door to take. So he had very much the same experience. And I don't know if you remember, but in the coffee house, we had that stand-up comedian named Andrea, and she kind of went on and on about how she got lost, and when she came in, she was looking for a predominantly Asian church, and she found a bunch of Hispanic people, and she was kind of maybe the wrong place, and then she texted, and so she went on and on about she got lost trying to find us, and she was being invited by somebody from Sky Fellowship, right? Imagine somebody that just happens to decide to come and visit us. How more quickly they would get lost and maybe never find somebody because they don't have anybody to text and say, hey, I'm here, which is the right door. So there are little ways like putting signs that we can be more hospitable. So the external ways of welcoming match the internal ways that we welcome people. Now, another suggestion that Mary Davila gave us was to have greeters at the entrance, which we do that, who do not keep talking to each other when people come in. And she also suggested to keep the website up to date, because it's very frustrating when you're looking for information from a church to notice that the website is not up to date. Also, avoiding insider language that, for example, acronyms, because people don't know what that means. And in our case, I think, for example, also names of groups, like we say 11 teen. Well, somebody from outside wouldn't know that that's a group for teenagers to join, right? So maybe when we have printed materials, we want to take that into consideration to be more welcoming of people. We may think that we will not have visitors, but if we are ready to receive them, when they come, they're going to stay. God invites us to be hospitable with strangers. God's invitation comes with a promise of light, healing, and protection. Let us be hospitable. Let our ritual ways of worship and fasting come accompanied by the ethical mandate of caring for others. So help us God. Please pray with me. We thank